Hello, 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 and welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we are breaking generational curses in the Black community. Today's guest is Mr. Keanu Jackson. Hi, Keanu.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing so well today. Really just trying to lean into rest. Take this day off, you know.
There we go. Us, and when we are done, you can get all the rest you need.
Mm-hmm.
Let me let our awesome guests know how amazing you are. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Good. All right. Keanu, whose pronoun is he, him, is a charismatic and thoughtful queer Black psychotherapist, educator, and visionary based in Brooklyn, New York, who earned his Master's of Social Work degree from Columbia University. Being raised in the historic Fort Pierce, Florida, Keanu's introduction into liberation work came as a result of him struggling to locate language and spaces that allowed him to feel seen, heard, understood, and cared for. At the forefront of his work is an emphasis on bodily autonomy, agency, and expression as necessary components for healing and liberation. Keanu believes that the body is a sacred entity that houses the many intricate pieces of the core self that work in tandem to offer room for empowerment and self-acceptance. As a survivor of sexual trauma and ongoing anti-Black racism and violence, Keanu practices radical joy and play interwoven into the tender gratitude towards the self that he wishes to share with others. Amazing. Within his therapy sessions, Keanu invites his clients to channel this gratitude as a means to grant themselves permission to slow down and tend to the body's needs. During his workshops, he highlights the importance of community as a conduit for nurturing shared understanding and inciting action. To him, we each have rich personal narratives that deserve to be protected and preserved as mantras of our undeniable worth. This aside, Keanu is a fun-loving, witty, sex, and kink-positive force of nature who knows a bit too much about cartoons and loves to frolic in the park with a lavender latte in tow. Yes, I love it. OMG, that has to be the most amazing bio ever.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just say this real quickly. Your vulnerability and transparency, I just love you to death, okay? And you're not even my therapist. And I just want to say that because I know a lot of times, our clients come to us and they're hurting and they're going through stuff and they're scared and they're reserved and they just don't. It's just hard. It's hard to open up to somebody about such personal, especially in our community. And we're going to talk about that. But the fact that you just you just said it all there. I feel like, we friends or something. I really do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, obviously, I went to Columbia too, by the way. When did you graduate, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I graduated with my social work degree in 2020.
2020. Okay. So I was there a little bit further, and I was I was at Teachers College.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah. So pretty cool. Awesome. So, typically I like to ask kind of what got you into this work. So yeah, I guess we can start there. I mean, you kind of told us, but a lot of people go through things and they just want to be removed from it. What do you think it was about your experience, if you want to go there, or just life in general, your perspective that said, no, I really want to sit here and help other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as was mentioned a little bit in my bio, I grew up in a very historic, very just a rich Black community in a small town in South Florida.
Okay.
And I attribute a lot of my interest in education, my interest in just learning, curiosity, etc., from my late grandmother, who was an educator within the community before she passed away. So she was a librarian, she was a teacher for a very, very, very long time. And so
Nice.
I felt like that I was in an environment that really highlighted the importance of education. And not only that, but really just asking questions just about what was happening around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I grew up, I began to witness, I began to notice, and I began experiencing a lot of just systemic and institutional harm that I really did not have language for. I didn't really know how to express myself, didn't really know how to describe what was happening. And for me, I really wanted to try and figure out not only what was happening, but if I'm being impacted to this degree, how can I use this as an opportunity to continue to connect community, advocate for resources, locate avenues for us to have just better access to healing, and really just having an opportunity to think about, well, where is my place within all of this? And so eventually that led me to college, where I majored in psychology, found out about the social work field, and I was like, oh, I can blend. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Community, mental health, social justice, all of this was super important for me, blended into this one nice, cute package. And I just leapt for it, jumped headfirst into it, applied to Columbia, got in, and here I am today, therapist, doing my thing out in the community, and just really trying to do my part in continuing to provide this education, to continue to bring folks together and to have these sorts of like conversations, and really just think about ways in which we can continue to honor ourselves, to fight for our liberation, and to give us a chance to just be and do something different than what's expected.
Let me ask you, first of all, thank you for that. Thank you for that. What do you think is hard? Because in the Black community, you're right. We don't really embrace the queer community as we should. And I'm more specific, the Black church. And as a member of the Black church, I feel like that needs to be said. Why do you think that is, Keanu?
Yeah. So this is a very huge conversation that, first off, again, it comes up, but at the same time, I feel like it doesn't. In my most honest of opinions, I just say, well, look at the history of just what does it mean to be Black, specifically within the United States, right? And just behaviors and beliefs and conditions that we've had to just adapt in order to survive, right? And so when it comes to some of the distancing from queer community in particular, I'm thinking about, well, how often, was it just ironed into us that if we didn't fit within this box, and by this box, I mean, listen, our bodies were used to reproduce, for labor, we were treated quite literally as just objects for a long time. Even to this day, a lot of us are still treated as if we're nothing more than objects. So I think about, well, what queerness represents in and of itself is just so outside of that, right? That it can just be perceived as something that is very threatening. And I think that over time, as Black folks continuously had to try and survive, had to do what they can to kind of keep a low profile in order to survive, right? What that then changed into was this social belief, this conditioning that queerness in and of itself is wrong, when that's not true. Queer people have always existed. We've always been here, right? And so that's a little bit of a rambly thread, but I really just think a lot of it just boils back down to the ways in which we were restricted, the ways in which we were herded into just being nothing more than tools.
Wow. Is it possible that I believe anytime a group is discriminated against, you decided that, okay, I'm going to be an advocate, but it's easier to just be well, I'm just going to discriminate against somebody else. So do you think the Black people said, well, hey, I'm Black, but at least I ain't Black and gay, and kind of have discriminated against you all because you're technically worse than just being Black?
Well, I mean, I would say yes, and so I'll start off by saying that, throughout my own upbringing, I have the privilege of having a family that's incredibly accepting, and a family that didn't ostracize me because of my queerness by any means. In actuality, it was largely celebrated, which is something that, again, I feel I never had to worry. And so I feel a lot of my perspectives and understanding around it, is like a little different. However, to your question, to what you said, yes, I think that for like a lot of us, you know, for a lot of folks who are straight, who are cisgendered and straight specifically, there can be some of this idea of, oh, well, at least my child is not queer or is of that community. You know, I only have to worry about them being Black. And that is something that I had heard early on when I had come out. I was like, oh, you know, I had always, so my mom, after I came out to her, it was a very emotional time, not because she was like rejecting me, but she sat me down and was like, hey, this is how the world treats queer people. I want to support you. I don't know how to protect you as a mother. Up until this point, I had only been trying to protect you as like a Black boy growing into a Black man. And now there's this whole other level to it that I didn't know about. And I think that the way that my mom approached it at the time, you know, it really helped me to kind of better conceptualize just like, one, like how queer people were treated, but also it gave me what I like to call like my first like viewpoints and my first like tidbits of understanding around the idea of intersectionality and thinking about how like all of like our identities exist, you know, just at the same time exist in congruence with each other. But I say to your question, it's kind of like a yes and, because I do feel like there are a lot of folks who do try to distance queerness from Blackness, right? I see it online all the time where people are talking about, oh, like, you know, the queer community, the LGBTQ plus people are at odds with Black people. And I'm just like, Black queer people like exist. Like what are you talking about? Like there are literally Black queer people. There always have been Black queer people. We're not two separate entities. Like what are we literally talking about here? And so I think it's like a yes and. There's like a distancing that happens that I see constantly, and at the same time this higher level of awareness of like, oh, well, at least I'm not Black and this. But normally in my everyday to day, what I view is, oh, there's a lot of folks who don't even consider Black people are capable of being queer, which is a whole thing.
One of the questions I have, and I'd like your take on it, I believe that the queer community has made a more progressive, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but more progressive, I guess shouldn't say more progressive, but just because of the way you just described it, I feel like within the Black community, and yes, I'm separating for the sake of this argument. I understand that Blacks and queers can be the same, but in the Black community in general, I feel like we're more competitive and we fight against each other, and we, you know, the crab mentality is one gets up, we pull each other down, and that's part of the reason why we still have a lot of division here. But when I look at the queer community, Black, white, blue, purple, whatever, I see all this sticking together more. And as a result, I think it turns like, I know we have Black History Month, but y'all about to have y'all's whole month, you know, coming up, and people gonna be paraded, and, you know, all of these, but with the laws and the bathrooms and the, you know, letting y'all get having equal opportunity to marriage, just a lot of change in I guess a shorter amount of time. I mean, do you think that as when you identify as a queer, if you had to separate the two, as a member of the queer community versus the Black community, there's more inclusivity or more support for one another?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
Well, I say that because like there is no way to quite like for argument's sake, I cannot separate my queerness and Blackness. Like there's quite literally no way to do that. Okay. My experiences are not as a Black person or as a queer person. Like my whole life, I've been a Black queer person. Actually. You know, and so when I'm thinking about progressiveness, for example, I think that for those of us who are like Black and queer specifically, there's not like, I don't know, like the question of like more progressive means what? Like, for example, like I think it was only like a few weeks ago, I think I saw a headline saying that like queer men now are allowed to literally donate blood because we weren't allowed to do so, just because there is like stigma against men who have sex with men. and like HIV and like AIDS, etc., when straight people also can contract HIV. But again, so like, and so like I just feel like there's I don't think that there's any way to like compare.
Opposite, maybe you have it worse, because like I said, you're Black and queer. Because I know a couple years ago, up until I think 2022, it was legal to discriminate against hair texture. Like if someone came to your job, if they had a nappy hair and afro and you didn't want to hire them for that, there was nothing to do. So that was so I guess you have that plus not being able to donate blood, Well,
yeah.
one thing, I want to ask this, because what I think is beautiful about your story is that your family is so inclusive. So for people that are listening, what is it that your mom said to you or did to you, or, what was it that made you feel, because I know a lot of, the shame and the guilt and the lack of support obviously makes things worse. Not only do you have to deal with the stigma and the stereotypes, but then when your own family shuns you, and I love that you've been spared from that. So what advice, I guess, would you give to a family that might have someone who's either coming out or is about to come out, or somebody who wants to come out? Because, what are some strategies, I guess, to help that process?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any, I guess, specific strategies. What I will say, though, is like, for example, if you have like a child, who is questioning, like their sexuality or just like their gender expression, etc. I just want to remind parents out there, specifically remind caregivers, that your children are not property. Your children quite literally are not property. Your children, right, like, are not you, right? They're not replacements for you. They are their own individual people with their own individual experiences, desires, hopes, dreams, etc., etc. And you need to be able to recognize and honor that. There's a difference between wanting to caregive and wanting to protect, right? And then wanting to dominate. And I think that's something that my mom did, that that what my parents did in general was they allowed me and like my siblings to all of us be our own individual people, right? Not comparing us, not telling us that we have to do X, Y, Z, or it's expected for us to behave a certain way, giving us an opportunity to figure things out for ourselves. Something that my mom says to me all the time whenever we talk about parenting and just her decisions. For context, I'm the oldest of four. Something that she had always expressed to me was, I never wanted carbon copy kids. I never wanted kids to be the exact same as I was, to make the same decisions as me. I didn't want any of my children to feel like whoever they were was going to be dismissed or not taken seriously or ignored. Like, I wanted my children to be themselves. That was my first priority. I wanted them to be themselves. I want them to be loved. She meant that, and it's evident because me and my siblings are all totally different paths, all individuals. I'm not the only queer one in our family either. Like, there's just like a lot of, we're just very different people, and it's fantastic.
Well, I get the feeling that is fantastic. That is fantastic. Cahoots to your mom. I get the feeling, though, that you kind of knew when you came out to your mom that she was going to be okay, or that she was going to be accepted. Is that pretty accurate?
So I did not know anything. So a lot of my assumptions, I like to tell people that, like, my mom knew that I was queer before I knew I was queer. There was one time that she had specifically asked me, I think I was like 11. She had straight up asked me if I was gay, and I had no idea what that even meant. I didn't know what gay was. I was like, no, what are you talking about? I don't know what that is. And then eventually I came out to her and my dad my freshman year of high school. And so
how did dad respond? Was he supportive as well?
Yeah, I had no backlash or anything. Both of them wanted to talk more about it. Out of the two, my mom was more emotional. Not from like a place of, oh no, my son is like queer, but more so like, yo, like this is the world. I want to be here and protect you. You can come to me. Know that you can come to me. That was like the energy that she had. My dad was just very much so. We had to talk about it. I was kind of like whatever, but he was just like very interested in like knowing more about like he was very curious. So I was like, I don't have answers for you. I'm just vibing. I'm just here. I'm a freshman in high school. I don't know anything. But yeah, and so I didn't really know how my parents were going to respond, because a lot of the messaging that I still received from the environment, from like, you know, just from being a person who was growing up, was that queer people were not accepted. You know, from what I had understood and from what I had seen from my peers, it's that it was almost expected that like your family was going to have a terrible reaction, no matter how much you thought like their parenting, you know, was like good and loving beforehand. It always, from what I had seen and from what I've heard,
it can go either way.
Not even that, but like there was like a 90% chance that it was gonna go terribly. And so I remember my parents were not even the first people who I told. I came out actually at school during like a group presentation, and I was like presenting like a topic, and I came out to like my whole class. For me, I was like, okay, let me test the waters at school to see how people react. And then, you know, let me see if I have friends who can, you know, support me in case it goes south with my family.
Did they support you?
Yeah, so I had friends who definitely had supported me. Like there are some people who I texted like one-on-one before I had my grand coming out. But then a lot of people didn't even believe me. From freshman year up until I graduated, like there were some people who were like, "Oh wait, you actually like you're serious?" I was like, "Yeah." Like who jokes about what are you talking about? So whatever. So I mean, in hindsight, it was fine. I had nothing to worry about. I realize now as an adult that I went to a very queer like high school. At least like my graduating class like was very, very queer in hindsight. But you know, when I was a kid, I didn't really know anything. I was like, I'm just gonna do this thing, see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
With my very limited, you know, I mean, I have certainly, you know, friends from all different backgrounds, but not heavily in the queer community. I'll be transparent about that. It's not intentional, but it's just, I guess, birds of a feather flock together. But this is I certainly have had clients and have seen, you know, the media and stuff like that. And, you know, you have probably the best story I've ever heard, you know, in terms of just having so much support. And there's no doubt that has contributed to some of your success as well, and your ability to be able to, you know, go on with your career and have, you know, just, you know, a different experience in life. What would you advise a person who didn't have supportive parents, or whose class members did judge of it? You know, what are some things you would suggest?
Yeah, and so I can't, well, one, I'm going to preface by saying, you know, well, clearly I'm not the spokesperson for the entire queer community. And also, you know, we're not a monolith, right? We all have a variety of experiences. And so I think that when it comes to coming out, this is a point where I really try to emphasize community, and just like the idea that, like, you know, your family can truly be whoever you make of it. And this is like something, again, that I've learned just from my mom, which I think has also informed a lot of like her parenting. For context, my mom's adopted.
Sorry, your mom?
So, my mom is adopted. And so a lot of like her experience, you know, she has felt isolation. She's felt what it's been like to be othered, right? It's like a lot of like what she has taught me and my siblings is through this idea of like creating meaningful connections to people who will be there for you. And so that is something that I like to pass on to folks who may be thinking about like coming out, right? Also understanding that like coming out isn't for everybody, and you don't need to come out in order to be, into like validate or to like affirm just like who you are on the inside.
So you don't need to tell people that you're gay.
No, you don't have to tell anybody. That's not anyone else's business but yours. Like truly, that's not. And also we need to be able to assess for safety. I mean, think about the people who are in your life currently. Like who are the people who do feel, who you do feel safe around?
That's why I asked this question, because I mean, I understand what you said in terms of you didn't really know around this topic, but it sounds like in general, your parents have been very supportive and very understanding of you in general. So I'm not disputing what you said about your own life, because you know the best, but it sounds like if they would have objected to it, it would have been very, very out of the norm. But what sometimes, people have to, well, I guess like you said, they don't have to come out. I mean, if you've got a conservative dad who's like a stone home Christian who is going to, ostracize you and judge you, that's really what I want to know. Do you have to have that conversation with that? I mean, I have a cousin in my family who I'm thinking about right now, and he ain't come out to nobody, and it's just like, we all know, but it's just like, we don't really talk about it because he doesn't. Well, that's why I don't talk about it. But so basically we don't have to have those, rather than harm ourselves by coming out to somebody who's going to judge me. It's better to just, it sounds like from what I'm hearing, just not say anything at all.
I mean, it's up to the person and how they feel at the end of the day. The point is really, your coming out is not anybody else's business. No one should be forcing you to come out, right? If you feel like if you are a person who feels like you have a family member who might be queer, you have a friend that might be queer, that's not your responsibility to go like digging into like their business to try and like uncover the truth, right? Like, no, like ultimately your coming out is your business. It has to be rooted in like your own feelings of safety. And
well, that's what, okay. So why would a person who feels that their family might judge them, what would be the benefit to that person still coming out? I guess that's where I'm a little confused. Why, why would you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's some folks who, for example, are seeking just like connection, or like, let's say if they are a person who grew up in a very strict religious upbringing and they may feel like there is some tension, not necessarily between them and their religion, but I guess like how that religion has been discussed within like the home. Or maybe they feel like, okay, I don't really have any folks who have a sense of who I am, right? And I want to talk to a sibling, or I want to, talk to a parent, right? A parent's role is to protect, is to caregive, right? And unfortunately, like what we see a lot of times is that folks kind of use like their care or their love. It's like their care and their love like comes with like a set of like terms and conditions, which unfortunately does impact a lot of queer people. And so there could be a variety of different reasons as to why a person who may feel like, they may be judged for coming out might still choose to come out, but ultimately, again, that's up to them to decide for themselves. You have to be able to center that person's specific like agency, and also not blame them for any of that decision making when it comes to disclosing their sexuality. I've worked with like a bunch of clients, for example, some who have decided to come out in the family, and some who are like, actually, I'm just gonna wait until like my parents pass away. Or, oh, I'm gonna move. And after I move out of my parents' home, and once I'm responsible for my own bills, then I will say something, right? Or there are people who are like, yeah, I know that like my family isn't gonna take it well, and I don't care,
Don't care. Mm-hmm.
For me, and this is where I bring up my own like coming out. So in a lot of ways, I don't feel like my coming out was like my choice. I came out specifically as a method to like stop my parents from arguing with each other. So for context, like my parents have been divorced since I was in like the first grade. And so like, the night that I came out, it wasn't like all right, I'm gonna do it, it's finally here. No, it was like, no, my parents were in an argument with each other. And I was like, okay, I don't want them arguing in front of me. What can I do to stop this argument?
Let's change the subject.
No, but exactly. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like my coming out wasn't my choice. Even though they didn't have negative reactions to it, still, it was like, okay, I'm using this to distract from this other thing that's happening instead, right? And so all that to say is there's a variety of reasons why a person might choose to come out, even if it might mean then exposing them, putting them at risk for something. Ultimately, as an ally or as a person who's trying to support a person who's recently coming out, I think it's just important to try and, one, center that individual person's needs, asking them, what does community look like and feel like for you? Like, what do you wish support would look like and feel like? How can I do that for you if possible? And really trying to see just like what is in, like within like your realm of control and your power to do that for that person. Which I feel like answers the question plus other questions.
It did. But you know what it did for me though? It helped me realize my own privilege, because I am the most intentional about silence is golden. Which when I got married, I didn't even tell anybody I was getting married. Like we pretty much I told like my very, very close people, but I think maybe 10 people were there, and that's being very general. So I say that when I was under investigation, of course, most people don't talk about their investigations, but still the details and stuff, I've been very tight-lipped about it, other than, I've shared more with my community than I have my friends and family. So it's just funny because, the gay community has this whole coming out process, right? Like where it's, whatever. And this is the first time I've actually even considered the possibility that ain't nobody business, like you do it if you want to, and if you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. Just like me, like when I wanted to get married, hey, I don't want you to know, okay? Like I'll tell you when I tell you, if I want to tell you, and you find out how you find out. But anyway, so yes, that was a lot of information to that question, but it was very, very useful, helpful, and hopefully it will be for other people as well. I want to move on because there's something that you posted on Facebook and on Instagram, and we said that we were going to talk about it today. And that was about men who might be curious about anal play. And we basically are talking about this show in regards to calling it Expansive Sexuality. So, when I first saw that post, I was like, man, I got to know more about this, So why would a man be curious about sexual play if they weren't gay?
Because men have sex just like everybody else. And sex isn't one specific list of things, and pleasure isn't confined to one set list of things.
Can you explain? Hey, you were giving me information about that, I think, before we hit record.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so, listen, I'm a huge advocate for anal play. I tell people, if you are curious about anal play, then go ahead and do it regardless of your sexual orientation. I think that there is this idea that for men, for straight men in particular, who are interested in exploring anal play, that somehow will emasculate them in some capacity, or that it would signify that they are weaker in some way or more submissive or something, and that is literally just not true. Something that I try and do a lot throughout my work is really trying to normalize this idea that people should be entitled to have the type of sex that pleasures them or that pleases them, and giving them access to be curious and to explore their bodies in a way that just feels just more aligned and connected to who they are. I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but for a lot of us, we are told that our bodies need to do certain things, perform in a certain capacity. Otherwise, what use are they for, right? And so I like to tell people that we are much more than objects. We're much more than just tools, just to be used by folks in power. And what that looks like is giving people an opportunity to have sex with trusted partners that can feel just way more expansive and just way more explorative than what they're typically used to.
Love it. Love that response. Why do you think that because I think, even as I read it, like I said, I was really, I guess, surprised by that. And I recognize that it's because it was men, because I can totally see women have sex with women all the time and nobody says they're gay, or even if they are, it's not seen as like, what's the double standard about?
Well, I mean, I would also say that just because a guy is interested in anal play, that doesn't mean that he is having sex with another man.
Oh God, okay, explain that, because now I'm really confused. Oh,
yeah, like a woman could, like, for example, like rim a man, which, is like mouth to butt, or a guy could enjoy being fingered if that's like something that he's interested in doing, or like using a variety of like sex toys. Like, for example, like there are a lot of women who enjoy like pegging men, which means, having like a strap on or like a dildo and like using that on the man. That doesn't mean that man is gay. That just means
doing that one time with one of my girlfriends that I was incarcerated with, by the way, was just telling me, and it was so funny because, maybe fill me in, maybe I'm biased, he was this big football player, just the last person you would ever expect. So he just asked her to do it. That's called, you say pegging?
Yeah, pegging.
Okay.
Yeah, and so like people are just like into whatever they're interested in. And I think that there is a lot of just like shame that's just embedded in the way in which we are taught about sex.
He knew that she told me, he was like terrified. Like, do not tell anybody.
And yet, but I mean, but again, like there is just like a lot of shame in just like sex and sexuality, etc. And like a lot of that just goes back into just like what we're taught about sex and what we're not taught about sex, right? A lot of that also exists within like the queer community too, where folks, based off of their appearance, get like typecast into particular like sexual roles or dynamics that may not even be like what they're interested in. And so ultimately, the point is that, when it comes to having sex and it comes to having like fulfilling and like pleasurable and affirming sex, it's, really having an opportunity to just be yourself, inform your partner of your needs, you as a partner, just like allowing that freedom of expression and really seeing like how y'all can continue to have fun and play together.
Love it. Just like a heterosexual relationship.
Like, and that's the thing though. Going back to like that main point, again, a man deciding that he wants to like use anal beads or have a butt plug or like get fingered or something, that doesn't make his relationship any less straight. It just means he is the straight man who likes to have his butt played with. Like that doesn't.
With a man, does that make him gay?
Huh?
What if he wanted to do all that stuff with a man? Does that make him gay?
Not necessarily, not in my opinion. We can't tell people how they identify. For example, going back to like what you shared, how we are thinking and like how we are taught to think about just like sex and sexuality, there are plenty of examples where women, like cis women in particular, cis straight women are allowed to like experiment, be curious, and like explore each other. And it can just be perceived as like a cute, fun girls' night. And like, that's just it, right? But for men, for some reason, if a man is curious or if a man is wanting to like, experiment around, all of a sudden, not only is he gay, but then folks are adamant that no matter what he does after that, it doesn't matter because he is gay. Because he was curious, that means he's
one
gay.
Thing, yeah. Huh. Oh, okay. What are some resources that you would recommend, just in general, for people who are curious?
Just
or
like
people who know and just want to experience happiness in a queer, discriminating world.
And so gonna use this as an opportunity to plug the place that I work at. So I work for an organization called the Expansive Group, which is a sex therapy practice that is all about teaching folks just about the different like nuances of like sex, sexuality, relationship, intimacy, etc., and giving people an opportunity to like build community within that as well. And so their Instagram account is the Expansive Group, but then also our CEO Casey Tanner, they also have like their own separate page called Queer Sex Therapy, that really just goes into depth, just like talking about a variety of topics related to just like sex, relationships, intimacy, exploring, like questioning. Like it gives you a really great starting point, in my opinion. And then they, of course, interact with and follow like a bunch of other accounts that provide a lot of useful information as well.
Can we get them on Instagram?
Yeah. So for the Expansive Group, it's literally the Expansive Group on Insta. And then for Casey, their Instagram handle is Queer Sex Therapy.
Love it. Can you, when we're done, email me these handles so I'll make sure that they're in the notes? Okay. Yeah. Well, this is fantastic. I don't want to leave anything out. What would you, if there was just like one takeaway that our Black community could have from this topic, what would that?
Yeah, let people have fun. Like let people have fun. Oftentimes when I observe people having like a particularly strong reaction, I'm like, okay, well, what is that stirring up within you, right? What discomfort is that like dislodging for you, and then how can you take that and then mind your business with that, right? Because you're not because like what you're reacting to has nothing to do with me. It's about what's going on inside of you, right? So I say let people have fun, do some reflection, and ask yourself, well, what if you had the opportunity to be a little bit more curious? What if you had the opportunity to be accepted and celebrated for your exploration? And how are ways in which you can tap into yourself that just feel more affirming?
Yeah, I just want to ask, are we jealous that you're brave enough to go out there and do something and that we're not comfortable doing?
Maybe. Maybe. Literally, maybe.
Hey.
I can't say. I've never lived my life as a straight person, so I have no idea. So.
Without, as far as you're comfortable with going, I mean, I know it's personal, but you did share about your own personal traumatic experience. How could you just speak to someone who's going through, because I have this similar experience, so that's something that we share. And that hurts, regardless of, it just hurts. What can we say to that community, and then that community that also has this added stigma of not only being going through that, but you're gay and Black, and just are there any words of wisdom you have for them today?
I mean, again, this is an opportunity for folks who want to be allies to really check within themselves and say, okay, well, what is it about me, the community that I keep? What is it about the space that I provide, that I, the relationships that I build that do make me a safe person to disclose to? And also thinking, well, just because you are a person who, let's say if you want to support a person who has experienced some form of sexual trauma or violence, that doesn't mean that you have to be the person specifically sitting down with that person. It can be looking into partnering organizations or looking at other community resources that can be a little bit more of a push, or perhaps encouraging a mutual friend who might be a little bit more in tune to what's happening, to hey, XYZ can maybe benefit from a conversation. Of course, not disclosing what's happening. You want to leave disclosure up to the person who's experienced the harm. But really just allowing yourself to be creative, and then also just being open and honest. If you know that there's a person who you love who is experiencing, a particular harm or violence, letting yourself be honest and open, saying, hey, I see that this is happening for you, and I'm sorry that you're having to go through this. What can I do? What do you need right now? How can I be of support?
I love that because, around conversations with, I think, just sex in general in our community, it's very guarded because, I don't identify as a member of the queer community, but there's a lot of shame around being abused sexually. Mm-hmm. I mean, there really is. And, it's part of the reason why people don't speak up more. It's part of the reason why it happens. It's part of the reason, and like you said, it goes back to our culture and our history. Like, our bodies have been objectified forever. So a lot of times we don't even know that something bad is happening to us, or if we do know, we don't know how to get help. There is no help. I mean, there is, but it's not accessible. It's not attainable to us, at least not back in the day when it was happening to me. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I just, like I said, really want to be thankful to you for just you getting out here and, having this conversation, because so many people don't. Like I said, it was so much easier if you just said, all right, get this, we'll put this in a box. That was my childhood and I'm moving on with life. But, you're really doing something that I believe takes courage. It's definitely needed, definitely underrepresented. And I don't know, I'm just glad we had an opportunity to have the conversation today. Is there anything that you just want to leave with our audience? Like, if nothing else, what do you want our audience to take away today?
Yeah, so I said it before and I'll say it again. Have fun. You deserve to have some play, to explore, and really, there is nobody who can tell you who you are or demand any piece of you in any regard.
Love it.
Yeah, so I'll leave it there.
Love it. I appreciate that. And like I said, that's just the same way I would tell somebody who belonged to the heterosexual community. There's no difference. This is what I'm trying to emphasize. It's the same thing. Well, I have enjoyed having you here. I've enjoyed what you have had to share with our audience today. Very enlightening. And I just wish you the best, like with your career and just the people that you're continuing to serve. I thank you, and I'm wishing you a lot of luck with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to chit chat.
Thank you so much for coming. All right, I'm going to close now. All right, thank you for everyone for tuning in. We have had an amazing experience with Mr. Keanu Jackson. We're going to leave his information in the bio. If you are in the New York area, do you practice anywhere outside of New York?
Nope, New York is my primary base, yeah.
You do telehealth?
Yeah, telehealth.
Perfect. So anywhere in the state of New York, he can see you. We're going to leave his information in the bio. Also, please drop your Instagram handle so they can at least get information from you on Instagram if they're not in the state of New York.
Yeah, so I can be found at The Black Queer Therapist on Instagram, and my website is keanumjackson.com.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, Keanu, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, audience, everybody, for coming. All right, peace and blessings, Dr. O. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Since you've listened all the way through, come on in and join the family. If you haven't done so yet, please join our free community where we offer weekly trainings and monthly giveaways. We can be found on Facebook under the Black Marriage and Families Matter Facebook group. And since you're serious about joining our family, we also invite you to join our All In campaign, which signifies your commitment to go all in, not only for yourself, but in helping us reach more people by downloading this podcast wherever you are listening to it, leaving us a review, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This really helps us reach more people and change more lives. After all, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we can all get more done together than we can apart. With that said, I want to encourage you to share this episode with just 3 other people who you think might also benefit from our community and what we are offering, with the hopes that all of you can join our All In campaign. When you're done, simply click the link All In campaign in the bio and receive a free copy of my course entitled Goodbye Toxicity, which is valued at $297. This course will help you to work through some of the difficult experiences that arise in most of our relationships, and it's completely free to you with your commitment to join our All In campaign. We look forward to connecting with you every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening.